Hey everyone, this is Dr. Casey Johnson. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I know you're going to love today's episode with Nick Hug Taylor. Nick is a really awesome guy and is doing some really positive work, so I'm excited to have him on to share his story with you guys. If you've been loving the Unlock Wellness podcast, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. Also, be sure to follow me on social media to keep up with the latest podcast episodes. The best way to connect with me is on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. My username across the board is at Dr. Casey Johnson. That's DrKaseyJohnson. You can also check out my website at drcaseyjohnson.com. It has all of the past podcast episodes and more information about each guest under the Listen tab. While you're on my site, also be sure to check out the Shop tab where you can check out my first book of my Healthy Children's Book series and learn about the Unlock Wellness Project, which supplies a wellness bag to a child in need for each book purchased. Thank you again for listening. I hope this episode leaves you feeling inspired to start making positive changes to your health. Now it's time for today's episode. I hope you love my conversation with Nick Hug Taylor. Welcome to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I'm Dr. Casey and excited for today's guest. I'm here with Nick Hug Taylor, and Nick is host of the Modern Boss podcast and is doing some really positive work. He actually started off his career as a commercial pilot, but after 4 years, he realized that he needed to make a change to live a life that he truly loved, and that's exactly what he did. And I'm just excited for him to share his journey of self-discovery and how his plant-based wellness journey ties into all of that as well. So, Nick, thank you so much for taking time to come on. I'm excited to have you.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. Yeah, it's a real privilege to be here.
Yeah, I just want to give a quick shout out to Fraser Bailey for connecting us. Fraser was a past guest on actually both of our podcasts, so definitely go check out both of those episodes and learn more about his story because he's an amazing guy.
He's a beast.
Yeah, he's just so inspiring, and I'm sure you feel the same way. Just an incredible person.
Yep, one of my favorites.
Yeah. So Nick, kind of just let's jump into your backstory. Walk us through where you're from, and then just how your story from wanting to be a pilot at a young age really just led you along your path to where you are right now, and then also what your health and wellness looked like at a young age too.
Perfect. Cool. So yeah, I was born in 1990 in Wellington, New Zealand. So that's where the funny accent's from. And pretty much I had a relatively normal sort of upbringing. I had a really supportive family. I grew up in a really safe neighborhood. Everything was really ideal. And so probably I'd say from the age of 2, my mum has a really funny picture of me where I'm wearing a matching tracksuit that says I'm a pilot or something like that. And so pretty much as long as I can ever remember, that's all I wanted to do with my life. So it kind of headed down that route from an early age. I was obsessed with playing flight simulators, reading up on planes, anything to do with aviation. And I actually started flying when I was 13, which was pretty crazy because I didn't even know how to, make my bed or cook dinner properly and flying around in a plane.
Right.
I went solo just after my 16th birthday, which 16 is the minimum age you can fly solo. And it was scheduled for my 16th birthday, but the weather was bad and my family was going to Fiji for 2 weeks. I was gutted. You should be happy you're going to Fiji, but I was gutted. And then, I went to worked really hard at school to get good grades, went to flying school and graduated that when I was 18, just after I turned 18. And pretty much from then, I was really, really lucky that at the time I decided to do something a wee bit different. Everyone was sending CVs out to all the aviation operators in New Zealand and, hoping they were going to get an email in return or mail back. And I was like, no, I'm going to pack my car up, I'm going to leave, and I'm just going to drive to every single one and see if they have, any opportunities for me. Because I thought seeing them in person and, them being able to see a wee bit about who I am has so much more impact than just reading a piece of paper where you're probably getting a couple of hundred a week anyway.
Right.
So it took me about 3 weeks, and I drove. So at the time, flying school was right at the bottom of the South Island of New Zealand. New Zealand split into 2 islands, and it took me until almost the top of the North Island before I got any hits. And so I got given a job pretty much straight away, and that was flying for a skydiving company. And so for the next 4 years, here was me, because I'd had such a not shouted, but just I'd been really mature and committed to getting my pilot license. I never went through any of those, those never went through any of the partying phase or drinking. And here I was, 18 years old, surrounded by guys who jumped out of planes for a living. So these aren't guys who are like finishing up work and going home and just being like, I'm just going to chill on the couch. Like it was, they're waiting for that next adrenaline kick. So it was pretty crazy. It was awesome. And then there was a lot of just crazy experiences. So I worked in that industry for 3.5 years, built up about 1,500 flying hours. And then just by chance, one night I was at a bar, which was what we did every night. I was at a bar and I saw this girl walk in with her friends, and I was like, who is that person? And so it was really interesting because I'd lived in this town for 3 years. It's a pretty small town. It's called Paihia in the Bay of Islands, which is kind of like a subtropical, I guess, resort sort of town. Mm-hmm. And this girl had lived there for like multiple years at the same time I was living there, and we'd never met, yet we knew all of the same people. It was really odd. And so this girl ended up being my now wife. So Viola is my wife. And we just started chatting at this bar. I was like, embarrassing story, but I was super wasted. And I think I was pretending I was a Spanish tourist called Javier or something like that. I don't know. And then I also promised her that I'd get her a free skydive, which again didn't happen. But
she never went skydiving at all.
No, she'd been skydiving twice, and so her first skydive, she hated it so much that she had her eyes closed the entire time, and thought, I don't know if I hated it because I didn't see anything, so she did it again.
That's funny.
So yeah, at the time she was studying biochemistry and human nutrition, probably about an 8 to 10 hour drive away from me. So for about 9 months we did long distance. And, that was all good. People say long distance is hard, but we were talking on the phone every day. Like, I just turned into one of those crazy teens, like, just
glued to your phone.
Just texting nonstop. It was ridiculous. But so I used to get the overnight bus down because I didn't have a car at the time. And that took, it was 12 hours on this bus overnight. Wow. I'd leave on Friday, so I'd have the weekend off. I'd get down there at 6 a.m. on a Saturday. I'd spend all day Saturday with her, and then I'd catch the overnight bus back on the Sunday. I'd get back up there at about 6 a.m. on the Monday and start work that morning. So it was pretty ruthless. But I did that probably, I'd say once every 2 or 3 weeks. And then it was just weird. I was kind of at a stage where I wasn't really sure if I wanted to keep flying for the rest of my life, because I think sometimes the things you're passionate about shouldn't necessarily be turned into a job or a career. And that was definitely the case for me. Like, I just didn't feel inspired to go and fly planes, which I thought was really odd. And I guess scaling that 30 or 40 or 50 years in the future, there was absolutely no way I was going to be happy with being a pilot if I wasn't after 4 years, right? And so I decided I was going to move down to Wellington, which is where I'm from, which was only about 2 hours away from where Viola was living. And I started working at the airport as a load master. And at the time, we were looking at starting a business. So she was studying, like I said, health and nutrition and biochemistry. I just learned so much from her in the times that we'd spent together about nutrition. And I was like, I loved it. I'd go down and we'd pull out her textbooks and she'd tell me about the Krebs cycle, or she'd tell me about, like how micronutrients work within the body. And I was just like, this is so incredible. I love this.
What did your diet look like at a younger age? Like, was all of that just so new, just everything you were learning?
I had not once considered that what I put in my mouth had any sort of impact on my health.
Yeah. So she was definitely that missing link for you in that aspect.
Yeah. And like even stuff like I can't recall ever having a meal without meat. Like just the idea of having a meal without having some sort of meat was just so foreign to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so she wasn't plant-based or vegetarian or even that wasn't even on the scope of what we were planning to do back then. And especially in New Zealand, they really hammer in, because New Zealand's got quite a high agricultural economy. So at university, they really hammer in eating, good quality meat, getting your dairy. So that was kind of the life we lived. We thought we were relatively healthy, but we were kind of doing what nutrition 20 or 30 years ago was recommending, which, as we know now, isn't really ideal. So over the next few years, we started building a health and wellness business, started marketing nutritional supplements. So we partnered with a nutritional supplement company who we both fell in love with. She did some nutrition work. And it was just this whole world opened up to me because we started looking into things like personal development, which again was nothing I'd ever even heard of. Nutrition was just something I became obsessed with. And it would have been about, I'd say 4 years ago now, I met a powerlifter and I was like, what is powerlifting? Because I kind of tried the gym, but I was one of those guys who would go for 2 days and then not for 2 weeks and never was really committed to it and would be like, I haven't noticed any difference, so what's the point?
Right.
Of course I didn't notice any difference. I did 3 curls.
Three times a month. Wasn't cutting it for you.
Well, the gym doesn't work for me. And I was always the scrawny guy. Like I'd weigh around anywhere between, the late 70 kilograms to maybe 83 kilograms was the highest I ever weighed back then. And I met this guy who was a powerlifter and I was like, what is powerlifting? And he explained it to me. And I think for fitness, my missing link was not having something to work towards with a quantifiable goal. Like I didn't like the idea of working towards a goal body weight or just going to the gym for no apparent reason. But when I learned about powerlifting and I was like, okay, I can set lifting goals and how much I can squat or how much I can deadlift and break those down into smaller goals, I fell in love with it straight away.
Right. Because obviously like the body goals are going to come as a consequence to lifting heavier. So it's just like you're just changing your mindset and your focus to something that's actually doable, but at the same time, like it makes it more sustainable. So you're not thinking about, I have to gain this amount of weight. Like it's less stressful and more fun. Yeah.
And so like I think that's the thing as well, is quite often powerlifters are viewed as, not even viewed as, they just are. They're those guys that just lift and they just eat as much as they possibly can because they want to get as big as possible. And they're eating in a way that's not really conducive to good health. I know this one powerlifter in the States who has these things called chicken shakes, and he literally mixes cream, raw eggs, spinach, and baked chicken together.
That's disgusting.
And this is the thing that, like, so many powerlifters think that sort of thing is necessary to becoming, a successful powerlifter. But it's really interesting because when you see powerlifters who do even just give a little bit of thought towards eating well and nutrition and good health, through strength training, they end up getting really desirable physiques anyway. So that wasn't a goal of mine, but that was definitely something that I was like, if that's a side effect to eating well and getting strong, I'm all for it.
Right.
And then I'd say it was really interesting, and I can't pinpoint an exact moment, but it started with my wife just bringing it up in conversation a few times. And there was just this interesting thing that happened where all of a sudden I started to think about not just what I was putting in my body, but how what I was putting in my body came to be. Mm-hmm. And I'd never really considered that, which is weird because it's that whole willful ignorance and cognitive dissonance, right? Like I'd never really considered that the steak that ends up on my plate used to be from a cow, which I drive along and see them in the paddock and be like, oh, they're so cute.
Right.
It was just so weird to me. And I felt like a little bit odd coming to this conclusion. But have you heard of Tony Robbins?
Yes. Yeah.
So I went to a Tony Robbins event called Unleash the Power Within. Mm-hmm. And on the last day of that, I think this is where it all started. On the last day, they were talking about health, and Tony goes through there's these toxins to human health, and he talks about animal protein as being one of them. And I was just sitting in the audience, like I'd loved this whole event. I took so much away from it. I really grew in leaps and bounds. And then on the last day, they were talking about how animal protein is not really ideal in terms of long-term health. And if you have a look at the studies, and I was just in the crowd, crossed arms, rolling my eyes, like, this is bullshit kind of thing.
Is Tony Robbins, is he vegan?
I don't think he's vegan, but I think he's definitely vegetarian. He doesn't eat any meat. And yeah, like when we were there, that just this whole last day was focused on talking about health, and a huge proportion of that was talking about eating a plant-based diet. And I was just so, I don't know why, but so resistant to the idea of it. I don't know if it was because of my upbringing or because in New Zealand, like especially 4 or 5 years ago, if you're a guy who didn't eat meat, you were this wuss, or you were,
right,
not manly or not masculine. So I was so resistant to this idea until towards the end of it, there was this challenge. And I'm a super competitive person. As soon as this challenge came up, it was don't eat any animal products for 14 days. And it was like 14 days, nah, I'll do it for a month. And so for a month, I didn't eat any dairy, any fish, any meat. And lo and behold, I started feeling really, really good. My training I had more energy than I'd ever had in the gym. My recovery was through the roof. And so after this 30 days, I hadn't quite made the connection yet. So I went back to eating dairy and cheese because I was like, that doesn't harm the animals. It's just a byproduct, And my friend who lived next door to me used to hunt quite a bit. And he'd gone hunting this weekend, and he'd shot a deer, and he brought back a deer. And deer is like a really premium kind of meat in New Zealand. Like you pay through the roof for good venison. And so he'd bought this big backstrap of deer over, and I was like, yeah, okay, sweet. I was trying to convince myself that, because it's hunted, he didn't buy it from the supermarket, it's much more ethical. Yeah, I'll go for that. So I cooked up this venison, and it was almost like my body was like, what are you doing to me? I couldn't sleep. My guts were going insane. I had like just this night of just hot and cold sweats, feeling really average. And the only thing I can put it down to this day is that I had this meat. And so that was the moment where I decided, sweet, I'll never, ever, ever eat meat again.
That's so crazy that you had that experience. I mean, you obviously needed to have that so you could have like just knowing that that's the right decision for you. But like looking back on that, isn't it crazy? Like I know you were talking about because you were so resistant at that conference and like you didn't know why, but like just how crazy it is, like the attachment that people have to like just the food that they eat, the food that they've grown up eating. Like it's just crazy how resistant people can get if you really get, oh, I could never give up cheese, I can never give up that. It's like, well, why? It's like, where's that attachment coming from? It's always super interesting whenever you like hear stuff like that, just like how strong that attachment to food people really have.
Yeah, it is super interesting. And I just see that all the time now. And when it's almost like when people seem to be the most resistant towards eating in a certain way is when they're just on the cusp of really translating into that. Mm-hmm. And so it is really interesting looking back how resistant I was, and also how resistant my wife was, but how there were just these really interesting moments where overnight we'd change. And I think like the dairy and the egg side of things, it just came to a point where, again, like with dairy, I had never really considered how it actually got in my cup or in this food. And I think that was the one that I was most shocked about, because when I started actually thinking about it, I was like, hold on, this is the worst one. Like how this actually becomes a product is terrifying, and there's so much pain and and death involved in that I don't think, if you're a sane human being and you really did your research in that area, I don't think you'd come to the conclusion that that's okay. And so it was really interesting, because that was another one where I was like, overnight, I was like, I can't do this anymore.
What did you have like a documentary or like something you saw or somebody you talked to that you realized that, or was that just another, like, you were really just thinking about it kind of
I was just thinking about it. So I started buying, like, organic free range milk, thinking that somehow that that was better, or it made the process less terrifying. But it was just, as time went on, and I guess as my conscience just grew on me, it was overnight changes. And then the same thing with eggs. It was one day I was eating literally 10 to 20 eggs a day, and the next day I was like, I'm not eating another egg forever.
That's crazy. It's funny, like, I was just thinking the other day, like, because I saw somebody eating eggs, and like, obviously that's a last, resort stop for a lot of people, like dairy, eggs. And I was just like, I was thinking about, because I used to put, like, I definitely didn't eat as many eggs as you, but I used to put like a raw egg, like, mixed in like my like veggie smoothie, and like, back in the day, like, like a few years, like I don't know, it was probably like 5 years ago or something like that. But like, I'm like, that's so disgusting. Like, that just grosses me out now. I'm like, I don't know how I did that. It's just crazy. Yeah, like you said, it's crazy how, like, just overnight, like, you change, and then all of a sudden what you did in the past just seems like so crazy and doesn't make sense once you get to that realization.
Yeah, it literally it feels like I'm looking back at like a story I've read or a movie I've seen, and that wasn't a part of my life at all. Like, that eating that way wasn't me, which is really weird, because it was for the vast majority of my life, that was the way I ate. Whereas now, I think because my conviction is so strong in that area, it's almost like I've blocked out that I ever did that.
Right. Yeah, it's just, it's crazy. So like, where did it kind of go from there? I know you said your wife was resistant. So did she jump on board once you, like, kind of explained where you were coming from?
So she would always be the one that would, I think, initiate it before me, and I'd be the one that was resistant a little bit longer. So she'd cut out dairy, and then, this was, conversations that we'd have, and that would come to I'll just get organic free range then. And then it was actually no. And then it was, she stopped eating eggs, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, that would be me. So she'd always lead, and then I'd always follow. And not because I was, just wanted to comply with her, because even if we ate different diets now, that would have been totally fine. But it was almost like she took the first step, and then I followed her. And it was always just, and it's really interesting, because quite often nowadays I'll see people, like, watch a documentary and come out of it being like, sweet, I never want to eat an animal product again. And they last 2 weeks or 3 weeks or maybe a month if they're lucky. And then they kind of start to inch back into, I'll just have a little bit of this, or I'll have that when I go out, or just eat when I'm at home. And I'm not sure what it was exactly, but like, our conviction, the minute we made that decision, it was a life decision. It wasn't like we'll try this out for now. It was a line in the sand, and we stepped over it. And I can't really put anything down to that, which is really interesting.
That definitely is. It definitely is. I mean, that's amazing, though, that you were able just to make that decision. But it was like, but it was a whole process, though, for you. It wasn't like you cut out everything at one time. So maybe that assisted that as well, just because it was a gradual process, and you just, like, you knew it was time to take that final step.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the cool thing from then, because it's been about 2.5 years since we would have eaten any sort of animal product whatsoever. It's interesting because every time I delve into, because I'm such a science nerd now, anytime I delve into any sort of journal article or new research, or I come to look at every time I go a bit deeper or I find out more, the data that's out there only supports plant-based. Like, there's no data to say that, environmentally actually it's okay, or ethically it's actually fine, or health-wise it's actually sweet to continue doing that. It's almost like, because the conviction was so strong, everything now seems to support that going forward, which again is really awesome, because I think for people who would tend to struggle with a dietary change, if they just look at the data, like the data overwhelmingly just supports that as a lifestyle change.
No, I love that you said that. And like, I think if you do see something that maybe says otherwise, dig a little bit deeper and see who funded it. Because if it's saying like, eat this, eat this, eat this, and that's not in the same morals with what we're talking about, more than likely it's funded by either the dairy industry or the meat industry or the pharmaceutical industries. And like, it'll say it on there who funded it. And if that's the case, then it's extremely biased to that cause. But it's something to like seriously be aware of, because it's out there and it's legal for some reason to do that. But it really is, it's crazy.
It is funny. And exactly, like if I ever do see, and every now and then I'll see something. I think I was reading a paper on the ketogenic diet the other day, and then going through, oh, this is interesting. Oh, weird. They haven't touched on the health impacts of eating this way. They've just really talked about the weight loss, but people are taking this and saying it's a healthy way to live. And then towards the bottom at the conflicts of interest, it said, Professor blah 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 of this university is coming forward with their conflict of interest, and they've been funded in part by, it was, like the US Pork and Something Association or something like that. And I was just like, how can you read that and be like, this is legitimate?
Right. Oh, it's so frustrating. That's crazy. It really is insane just how that's can be possible that can happen. But yeah, you have to be really, really careful with what you're looking at. And obviously, like, if it's supporting a plant-based diet, it's like, who's really to benefit? Like, there's no broccoli board out there, right? Like, somebody had said that on my podcast, but they said it was a different vegetable. It was something like broccoli board, and I was like, I kind of want to be on the broccoli board. That sounds awesome. Yeah, but so kind of back to your story, Nick. So you made those decisions, you and your wife, and like, where did that take you? Because like you're not flying anymore. So like, where did that take you guys business wise, and just how did that continue to lead you down your path that you guys were on?
So I'd say the first year that my wife had finished university, we decided to go traveling a wee bit. So that year we went to Canada and the USA, and traveling was always something that I thought was going to be a part of my life as a pilot. And again, looking back, I'm like, I'm glad I'm not, because all pilots ever see is the inside of hotels and airport terminals. It's not like they're out exploring for a few weeks on a layover, right? So traveling became a really huge passion of ours almost straight away. So we've been doing a huge amount of travel over the last 6 or 7 years. And just throughout that time, in between the travel and also while we're on travel, because that's a cool thing about living in the age that we're living in, is it's really easy to create yourself as a location independent entrepreneur, or as people say, like a digital nomad. Because if you've got access to the internet, you can run a business that will pay you regardless of whether you're in Germany or Hong Kong or traveling through Southeast Asia or New Zealand, because you can create a business that you don't need to be in any one location. You don't need people to be coming to your house, coming to your physical store. Everything can be run online. So for the last 5 or 6, 7 years, we've been really, really focusing on building just multiple streams of income. I read a book quite a few years ago by Robert Kiyosaki, which was Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yep.
He talked about multiple streams of income. And I've always wanted to have wealth, and not just for materialistic reasons, but also just for security reasons, and also so I can do good things with my money. Because whether you like it or not, like the age that we are living in, the best way to have influence, the best way to support a cause you believe in, is to do it through monetary ways. So there were definitely like barriers to overcome with my mindset in terms of earning money, because I always thought that rich people were greedy, or rich people were they had to do a one-up on someone else to get where they were. And I think the beautiful thing about the time we're living in is that the people who are succeeding in this generation, in this economy, aren't people who are doing those things. They're not the big hotshot salesman. They're not the crazy marketer guy with all the fancy words.
Right.
They're people who are able to be vulnerable and really connect authentically on a human level.
you have to be though. We live in a time where if you're not transparent, like their social media, like you'll find out really quick who's real and who's not.
Which I love. Like that's awesome.
Sure. Yeah, it's amazing.
And so, just over that time, we've been doing a lot of like education on business. We had our nutrition and marketing business, which is kind of our baby. We've been rolling that for quite a few years now, and we still love doing that. My wife does nutrition consulting occasionally, and she does business and lifestyle and mindset coaching. We started investing in rental properties just over 2 years ago. We have drop shipping businesses, just all sorts of stuff. Like, I think the issue with me is it's not picking, it's not trying to find something you're passionate about, or it's not trying to like create a business. It's just that there are so many opportunities out there now. It's hard not to, skip between them all because there are so many. And to really create success in any one area, you need to spend a decent amount of time on it. It's not going to happen overnight. So I'm kind of like the squirrel who's, there's a nut over there. I'll go try that one. I'll try, store some in my mouth. And I'm always kind of jumping from one thing to the next. So that for me has been a big learning curve, is really making a commitment and sticking to it for a little bit longer. Then I start to get bored, or it starts to feel like it's becoming a routine, because I'm so anti-routine. Just something about my personality, and I think again that's why I didn't like flying as a career. I decided that jobs just weren't for me anymore. Was as soon as something feels like it's becoming monotonous or a routine, I'm out of there.
Yeah. Do you still fly like as a hobby?
I haven't for a few years now, but the ultimate goal for me is, the thing that I love the most about flying is there's two aspects of it. One is aerobatics, and no one's going to pay you money to fly aerobatics, so you kind of have to do that yourself anyway. And the other one is, when I went to flying school, because I started flying so young, I'd already done my first 6 or 7 exams, and I'd already done about 60 hours of flying, but I still had the same I'd still been given the same amount of flying hours and the same amount of money towards my exams in my aviation course. So here was everyone else who had to do their first 6 or 7 exams. They had to catch up and do their flying straight and level, and learn how to fly a circuit, learn how to take off and land, learn how to turn. And I'd already done all that stuff, but I had those flying hours available. So all I'd do is I'd get up in the morning, I'd be like, it's a nice day, I'll check the weather. I'd be like, is there a plane free for a few hours? Yeah, this one's free, I'll take that one. And I'd just go fly around the mountains, or I'd go fly for 3 hours up the coast and land, go grab lunch and fly back. Like, that for me is what I loved. Right. And so the idea, ideally what I really want to do with that is just buy a little plane one day and do road trips with my mates, but in a plane instead of in a car.
That's awesome. Yeah, just like the freedom of it, right? Just having it as an enjoyable time, not because you have to do it, or like you have to do it to make money. It's just because you love it, and because because you can, really. Exactly. And when I'm flying a plane, it literally feels like it's just become an extension of my body. Like, I feel like it's almost like a spiritual experience for me, and it always has been. Mm. And it was really the structure and the job side of things, all the stuff I didn't like about, was why I decided not to do it as a career. But I can keep all the stuff I love if I do it, for myself and for my own passion. So yeah, no, I love that. And Nick, I want to talk about your podcast a little bit too, because obviously I want people to go check it out. But so what made you want to start your podcast in the first place? Kind of explain to people what it's about and just how that's going for you.
Cool. So yeah, I've always really wanted to do a podcast, and my wife and I started doing a podcast maybe a year and a half ago, and it was called Kiss and Tell, and it was kind of a podcast for couples, and like, we always get told that we're like relationship goals or whatever by all of our friends. So why don't we give people a bit of value on how we actually, because it doesn't just happen that way. We're really committed to each other, and we work on a relationship every single day. So like, people need to know this stuff if they think that's something that just happens, right? And same thing with that podcast. It was after 6 or 7 episodes, it just kind of felt like it was becoming a chore. I was like, oh, we'll just let that go. So I've always wanted to do a podcast, but I was never really clear on what I wanted to offer or what sort of subjects I wanted to have, or if I wanted to interview people or just have it myself. And I'm just an avid consumer of podcasts. Like, I'll listen to hours and hours and hours of podcasts a week, and I love it. And so I thought, actually, there are so many podcasts that focus on entrepreneurship and personal development and growth in all of those areas. But so many of them are focused on, when people have already made the millions, and they've got a $200 million company, and they've already become famous, and they're already a huge influencer.
Right.
And I think there's so much value in the actual process. And if people are going through those things right now, they need to be heard. The struggles that they're going through, the things that work, the things that don't work, the personal development and growth that they have to go through to reach those milestones. And I think sometimes if you've already made it and you're looking back, it's a bit harder to recall what it was actually like in those moments. So I just really wanted to start a podcast where I'd interview not necessarily normal, average, everyday people, but entrepreneurs or people who I see that if they keep doing what they're doing, they will become huge in their own right, inevitably, because they're doing all the right things. And I just thought there was beauty in getting to understand the process rather than, that final product. It's all about, because people all go through different experiences in their life, and they all go through so many different things that, regardless of who you are or where you are, potentially you don't understand those things. And, for example, I know some people who have gone through just the most ridiculously insane experiences where if I try to even consider myself in that position, I'd just be like, I'd be done. Like, I can't even imagine it.
Right.
And they've used those, not to become a victim and think, this is why I can't do these things, or this is why I'm this way because this thing happened to me. But they've used it to become a victor and actually use that as a catalyst to do great things in their life.
I love that. That's just amazing. And you're right. Like, it is important to hear like the process, because other people can take so much away from that person, even if they're on a different spot in their journey. And you've had a bunch of guests on. Have you taken away, like, what is maybe one or two of the biggest takeaways that maybe you've picked up from a guest just from learning about their journey?
The biggest one, and the one that I see, if every single person really embodied that decision, it would change everyone's life, is every single person who I've had on my podcast or who I've talked to about this kind of stuff, when they're in a really, really, really low point in their life, there's a moment where they make a decision that they go, okay, this is enough. I'm not going to stay a victim to my circumstances anymore. I'm going to take self-responsibility regardless of what happened to me or who did what to me, or if it was an internal thing or an external thing. They decide to take 100% self-responsibility for their life and their thoughts and their actions. And I think that would be the biggest one.
Yeah, no, I think that's huge as well. It's a whole different mindset. And I love that you are talking to these people as well. It's just like people that are going to be successful, like they have their mindset's just at a whole nother level. And it's just super valuable for people to understand that. So, I'm excited to hear people that you're able to impact just because they're hearing the inspiring stories. It's just amazing. I love that. And like, you were talking about just a bunch of stuff you're working on, but like, is there anything you have going on like in the immediate future that you want to just put out there and share with people so they can be keeping an eye out, or just continue to put out content and keep working on everything that you're doing?
So I'd say the biggest one would be my wife and I sold all of our belongings apart from, there's maybe 3 boxes that we have of stuff, like small boxes, nothing significant. We sold our bed, we sold our appliances. We have, some kitchenware and excess clothes and stuff, but we have 2 suitcases with our clothes in it. And so in June, we haven't booked tickets yet because we're always, last minute planners. soon we're heading to Europe, and we're going to be there for anywhere from, I don't know, 3 months to forever. So we're getting a one-way ticket, and we just want to go and see everything.
That's awesome.
As much as we can. Also the Middle East and North Africa as well. Like those are places I've always wanted to go. And even just, like the Middle East, it's really funny because even like, have you got Snapchat?
Yeah.
So this is one thing that I love doing, is because people have this perception of what those countries are like based on what they see on the news, right? Or on social media. Mm-hmm. And every single person who I talk to, who I'm like, I really want to go to Iran, Afghanistan. I'd love to go to, Morocco, Libya, some of these places. They're like, oh, it's almost like they're shocked. Like, how can you make a decision to go to these places? I'm like, okay, do you have Snapchat? They're like, yeah, of course. Okay, open Snapchat. Even in Syria, even to me right now, is somewhere I wouldn't travel to because it's so dangerous. And if you go onto Snapchat and you have a look at the location story in like Damascus, right? Mm-hmm. It's just normal everyday people trying to live their normal everyday lives. It's not this like ridiculously war-torn place where everyone's just trying to blow up everyone and there's looting and there's this, and it's all you can see is army and military. It's just not like that at all. And so I think one of the things I love about traveling is going to places like that and just meeting people, because I honestly believe that people all want the same thing. They want to live a life where they feel safe. They want to live a life where they feel loved and love other people. They want to live a life where they have, everything taken care of. They have some sort of abundance within their life, whether it's abundance of relationships or finances or health or all of those things. And I just love the idea that these people, just because they look a little bit different or live in a country where bad things are definitely happening, it's not to that scale. And these people are all beautiful people deep down.
Yeah, and like the media just plays the negative things up, and it's so funny that you say that, because like I was just mentioning that pretty much that exact same thing to my husband the other day, because somebody that I follow on like Instagram or one of these platforms like lives in Africa, and like there was like a picture up that was just like a normal like subdivision, and I was like, it kind of blew my mind, but I'm like, it would be like that, right? Just completely the same as what we're used to, but we're used to seeing like like the celebrity pictures in like in these countries, like handing out food and like we're just used to seeing just certain images that like really isn't the case for probably 90% of these places. So no, I mean that's 100% true. It's just like everybody wants and pretty much the exact same things. It's just different things get highlighted for sure in media.
And it's even like I spent 3 months in the USA last year. I've been to the States 6 or 7 times now. I love it. I love the States. I could move there in a heartbeat if your visa process wasn't so difficult. But yeah, like even things like saying that I'm going to the States for 3 months, to quite a few people in New Zealand, it was like, oh, well, like what's happening with the government there, or they'll have this opinion on who Americans are. Like all the time you hear, oh, like Americans just, they're not genuine. They just look after themselves. I'm like, well, that seems like a generalization. Have you traveled there before? And they're like, oh, no, I'd never. Not. Well, maybe go there for a while and actually experience it for yourself, because like I think Kiwis, they have this interesting perception of themselves, because everyone says, like New Zealanders are so kind and giving and friendly. And I think they are to tourists, but I felt so much more welcomed. I had so many more people asking me about, what I'm up to, who I was, what I'm doing, and than I ever have in New Zealand. So it might be a tourism thing, but I honestly, like, Americans are epic. And as it is anywhere in the world, it's just the crazy people are the ones with the loudest voice. So.
That's very true. That's very true. No, that's amazing. And obviously with, social media, it's just being able to connect with so many amazing like-minded people. I mean, obviously we're able to have this podcast right now from, I'm in Florida and you're in New Zealand. Like, it's just crazy how easy it is to connect with people, and like, especially when you have the same values, it's just super powerful. So it's just, it's really incredible.
Exactly. And I guess that would be because of that ease of access. Like if you're a person who's sitting at home and you do think the world's a bit of a messed up place, like it's your responsibility and it's your decision to actually go out and seek those positive things. Because if you take the opportunity to do that, you'll find infinite amounts of good news.
Yeah.
It's just that you actually have to, like, you have to put the effort in to find that, because it's not being posted on, your news websites, or it's not being talked about as much. But if you just take a moment to go and look for all the good in the world, it far outweighs any of the bad. And that's what I love about, like you said, like the ease of access now for me to talk to you, we're, 10,000 miles away.
Yeah, right.
You couldn't even think about doing that 10 years ago. Like maybe back then, but you'd have your 56K dial-up modem, which would...
You could write me. I mean, I could like read the letter that you sent me 3 months before.
Pen pals or something.
Yeah, no, it really is amazing. And like, I love the positivity that you're bringing to the world, Nick. And I'm just excited that you did, start your podcast back up again, and, getting that going. And, what is the best way, Nick, for people to follow you on social media? That way they can keep up with everything that you're doing and also keep up with your podcast as well. Cool.
So Instagram is where I like to hang out the most. And so my Instagram handle is just Nick Taylor, but without any vowels. So it's NCKTYLR. Because that's what sucks about having a common name, is all the good handles are taken. I've got a website which is www.themodernboss.com, and that's a bit of a work in progress, but I have my my podcasts on there. I have a couple of stories about me, and I also have an ebook. It's a free ebook, but I really, really love it. I think I've talked myself up, but I think it's really awesome. And it's called Bitch Peas, and it's just about my personal transition through plant-based and being a powerlifter, touching on like the ethical, the environmental, the health side of things, but referencing everything and having good literature there as well. But it's a good laugh. It's hard because it's really trying to keep. It's really hard for me to make a positive or like a funny spin on a topic that I think is really serious. So it was interesting juggling that. But if you want, go and download that book. I think it's really, really good. And just a wee bit more about me and who I am and what I'm up to is on there as well. So those would be the two main ones.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'll put all of that in the show notes. That way people can just go click and check out everything that you're doing. And then, Nick, just closing question that I ask every guest. But if you just had one piece of advice for the audience, maybe it's been something that's been your biggest takeaway through your whole journey so far. But if you just had just one piece of advice to give, what would it be?
Oh, man, that's hard. I'd say make a decision and draw a line in the sand to take 100% responsibility for your life and your happiness, your health and your success, and don't let other people give you unsolicited advice about what you know is best for you.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree, Nick, and that's perfect. And just, hey, Nick, thank you so much for taking time to come on. I loved having you and just excited to continue to connect with you and just share the amazing content that you put out. So just thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. It was awesome.
Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you loved my conversation with Nick. I love the work he's doing, so be sure to give him a follow on social media to keep up with everything that he's been working on. You can find his social media links and podcast links that we talked about in the episode in the show notes, but you can also find them on my website as well at drkcjohnson.com. That's drkaseyjohnson.com. Click on the Listen tab. Then from there, you'll be able to see all of the past guests that have come on the Unlock Wellness podcast, read a little bit about each guest, and be able to click on their social media links, websites, all of that. So all of Nick's information can be found on my site as well. If you guys loved today's episode with Nick, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you loved it. I hope it inspires you. And most importantly, I hope you take action.